Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, which is available now as a paperback and audiobook, but the ebook, oh, esteemed audience, the ebook is free. Yes, free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. Get your hands on that and come back with cash money for the two sequels. Under the super secret pen name Robert Kent, I've written some novels for older readers, such as All Together Now, A Zombie Story, and many others. You can find out more information about those, and more important, you can find interviews with thousands of authors, literary agents, editors at middlegradeninja.com. Couldn't be more thrilled. This morning, I had the absolute privilege and pleasure of being able to speak with Neal Shusterman. Mr. Shusterman, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So, esteemed audience knows that I never make my guests suffer through me summarizing either their book or their biography. Why would I do that when you're right here and could do a better job of it? So if you would give esteemed audience an overview of your background, and we'll go from there.
Oh, I'm Neal Shusterman. I'm an author of both YA and mid-grade books. Been doing it for quite a long time, since about a year after graduating from college. So I've published a total of 49 books. I think Gleanings is my 50th. I'm best known for the Unwind dystology, the ARC of a Scythe series, as well as the Schwa Was Here and Challenger Deep, which won the National Book Award a few years ago.
By the time you get to number 50, is it just kind of, oh, yawn, another book, or is it still that exciting thrill when you open a package and you get a new hardcover?
That opening the package, every time I get that package in the mail with the new book, I feel like Charlie opening up his chocolate bar and finding the golden ticket. I just take it nice and slowly, and I just slowly tear open that envelope to see that book for the first time. It's always fresh, it's always new, and it's always exciting. And I think if it ever stopped being exciting, I think that's the time you stop.
Well, I mean, after 50, no one would blame you. I mean, you've done it. Do you feel like you could walk away and like, all right, that's a pretty good, nice, even number. I'm done for now. Or are you still excited to get to it every day?
No, I'm still excited every day. I think I'm going to keep doing it until they pry that pen from my cold, dead fingers.
And I know you've got 51 coming here in April, so it's
yeah.
You've got to write another 9 now just to get to another nice even spot. Maybe 60 will be lucky number 60. So I know I've been reading the legend of your career in preparing for this, and I know that when you're in 9th grade, you've got an English teacher that challenges you to write a story. Well, I promise you I'm going to do your background. You tell the story.
Well, my 9th grade English teacher challenged me to write a story a month for extra credit because she knew I needed extra credit in English, and she knew that I loved writing. And so that's kind of what got me into writing regularly, was turning in those stories and getting that extra credit that brought my grade up, because I was the kind of kid who I was kind of like a self-sabotaging overachiever. I would always do more work than necessary, but it was always late. I never got anything in on time. And so I was failing English because of all the late projects. So she offered me this opportunity to earn back my lost points by writing stories. And so, but the thing is, the rule on that was I couldn't be late with the stories. Once a month, it had to be the first day of the month, or else I didn't get any credit. So she kind of used writing to help me learn how to turn things in on time, which most of the time I don't do still. But
have you
my
had
editors now forgive me.
Have you had the chance to reconnect with her since then and say, hey, look, 50 books later, look what she started?
Well, it was maybe around 10 years ago. I met with her for lunch and gave her this whole stack of books and told her, these are all here because of you. It was really a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Well, she's not telling every student she ever has for the rest of her life about this experience. She's missing an incredible opportunity. So I know I see your books touring when I teach at the local school here. I see kids carrying around Scythe or Thunderhead or some of the others. And I'm assuming she's seeing that too, and it must just swell her heart every time she does.
I'm sure she has. I mean, unfortunately, since then she's passed away. But I went back a couple of years ago to my old to my old middle school. I mean, to my old, I guess it was a junior high school. It was in ninth grade, seventh through ninth grade. And I spoke there and I mentioned her name and all the students gasped. And they said, our biggest award at the end of the year is named after her. And so it's like, I knew the person that the award was named after. She was a wonderful teacher, Hertha Postian. She turns out her year teaching me was her first year as a teacher.
Oh, wow. that starts off her career with a bang, right?
Yeah.
You inspire a New York Times bestselling author. What are you going to do next? What's your
at the time I wasn't, she didn't know that until many years later.
And then so was that when you knew you wanted to be an author? Had you an inkling before that?
Well, I wanted to do a lot of creative things. I wanted to be a writer, but I also wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a composer. I wanted to do all of these different creative things. Writing emerged as the thing that I was most passionate about. And that really started to, rise above all the other things I was interested in doing when I was in college. I used to write a humor column for my school paper at UC Irvine. And it got to be very well known over the 4 years that I wrote it. And so every week I had to turn in a column and it had to be funny. And I just really enjoyed sort of being this minor collegiate celebrity at the school, because everybody would read the column, but not everybody knew who I was. So I would walk around the school and see people snickering and reading my column when they're opening the newspaper. And it's kind of like I was kind of incognito. And I was a theater major and the psychology major. I was doing a lot of theater back then. But what I noticed was that there were theater people who were theater people. I mean, this was their life. For me, it wasn't my life. I just enjoyed it. But you know what I enjoyed more was I enjoyed writing plays that other people would perform. And so I realized that the written word was really my passion. And that's, and I went from there.
So psychology and theater, was the original plan to be just an actor who also does psychology on the side, or?
Well, by the time I decided what my majors were going to be, I pretty much knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't want to be an English major because everybody I knew who wanted to be a writer was an English major, and I didn't want to be just like one among many. Also, I hated the idea of writing analytical essays. I just wanted to do the fiction. So I took basically all of the fiction writing courses that the school offered to the point that they didn't have any more to offer me. So I ended up doing independent study with the head of the writing program there, Oakley Hall, who was like the guru of the UCI writing program, and it was when it was the #1 writing program in the country. That was a graduate program, but I was an undergrad. But I was doing independent study with the guy, who was running this program. Little did I know, that I was being mentored by one of the greatest writing teachers, of all time. So it was really a fantastic experience. But when it came to the majors, I figured, psychology is the science of the mind and behavior, and theater is the art of the mind and behavior. And I thought those would go together really well in terms of writing. So I was interested in the human mind, and I was interested in the whole theatrical aspect of not just acting, but just the experience of performance. So I think they went together very well.
Well, I assume that's all skills that you're continuing to use today as you're speaking with me. Anytime you're going out and giving a presentation, I mean, that's all your theatrical training coming to play, right?
Yeah, I get to do the one-man show all the time, so I'm still using that theater, and my books are all dramatic and psychological, so it's kind of all works together.
And you have gone on to kind of do a little bit of everything. I mean, obviously, books are a big part of your life, but you've also done screenwriting. You've written for the stage. You've recorded your own audiobooks. I assume if you wanted to start your own podcast, you could do that tomorrow and have a lot of listeners.
I actually have a Zoom meeting tomorrow about the possibility of doing a podcast. So that's exciting. I always want to do, new things and try something new. But yeah, there's a lot of things. I'm always trying to to expand and do different things. I loved doing the audios. I did the audio of The Schwa Was Here and Ansi Does Time. I got to be more Brooklyn in that. You know, I sort of brought back my childhood because I grew up in Brooklyn, and so I kind of just brought that back when I was doing that character, which was hard to get out of. When I'm done with the day, I still have, you know, it's still coming out Brooklynese. And then with the short story collections, with the Unbound and now with Gleanings, I've had the opportunity to do several of the short stories in the audiobooks, and that's a lot of fun because it's I kind of get to pick and choose which stories I read, and so I really enjoy doing that.
Well, obviously, if you're just doing, it's still very early on in what type of podcast you might do, but have you thought about maybe doing just like a narrative podcast, or is it you sitting down and interviewing folks, or is even saying that giving away too much?
You know, I don't know. There was one of the things that I was thinking of is, you know, there's unlike the publishing industry, I have a lot of, you know, the books, when I write them, they get published. When it comes to the entertainment industry, you write a script, even if it sells, it doesn't mean it's going to get made. So I have dozens of scripts that just have not been produced. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I did a podcast that were kind of like readings of these scripts that aren't produced for my fans who like my other work? They'll get to see some projects that otherwise would not see the light of day. So that's an idea that I have. I'm not sure whether I'm going to go with that, but that's something I've been thinking of.
Oh, fingers crossed. That sounds like a great program. And I know that you grow up in Brooklyn, but then you moved to Mexico City for your last 2 years of high school. And you've said that experience changed your life forever. How so?
Well, having an international experience when you're growing up just opens the world to you. Suddenly the world doesn't seem so big and so frightening and so far away. My father was an engineer, and he came home one day during the summer between 10th and 11th grade. And he said, "Hey, guess what? My company is transferring me to Mexico City." And at first we thought my mom and I, you know, thought it was a joke. I said, nope, they've made me this offer and I've accepted it. And we're going to go to Mexico City for 2 years. And so 2 weeks later, boom, there I was in Mexico City. I didn't speak a word of Spanish because I had taken 4 years of French, you know, in middle school and my first years of high school. So I had to learn Spanish, which I did. Necesito practicar para recordar mi español. That means I need to practice to remember my Spanish, but I can understand a lot of it. And it was, you know, this fantastic experience where I met people from all over the world and really came to be, you know, gain a sense of self-confidence. Because, you know, when you're kind of dropped in a country and you can't speak the language and you have to kind of fend for yourself and deal, at first it's really hard. I mean, I went through culture shock the first couple of months, but once I got over that, there's this feeling that you can just go anywhere and do anything. And you know, I went on after college after high school, went to college across the country, travel, you know, around the world. And I feel at home wherever I go. And I really attribute that to having had that international experience growing up.
I know as I'm talking to you this morning, you're in Spain and part of a long tour that's going to be going on the next 2 months. So I'm assuming that's a skill that's been able to be transposed onto you now, international traveler, to go around and rep the books, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love traveling. I love getting lost places. You know, I love getting lost in cities and trying to find my way around, even if I don't speak the language. Kind of feels like a video game. It's like I remember my first time in Japan. The subway system there is just confusing and immense. And I remember I was sitting there, and some people would get really stressed by that. It was fun trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B by changing through all of these different subway lines. It was like, you know, playing a video game. So now I'm spending 2 months traveling. First month is all in Europe. I had a number of events with my German publisher. And then I was supposed to visit my son in Thailand. My son Brendan lives in Thailand because all of my kids have had international experiences and now are traveling all over the world. So he lives there. and I lost my passport, so I couldn't visit him. So he came to visit me in Europe, and we spent the last week traveling by train around Europe, and just with no real plans, just trying to figure out what to do next. So we ended up in Bruges and Antwerp. We started off in Frankfurt, and then we went to Vienna and Prague, and just had a fantastic time. And now he went back to Thailand, and I'm here in Malaga, Spain, where I'm spending a week focusing on writing and getting some exercise in. And then I'm going to be doing a number of other things with my Dutch publisher and my German publisher. I'm going to be speaking at the Belgian Book Festival. So, and then after that, as soon as I'm done with all of that, I have a day in the UK where I do some signings of Gleanings before pre-publication. And then I fly to the US on November 9th to begin the tour for Gleanings, which is going to be going on through the entire month of November and into early December.
So when you're, and we're going to talk, I've got several questions for you about Gleanings available now, esteemed audience, but I wanted to make sure I ask about when you're traveling and you're writing. You said you're taking a week right now, and I appreciate you taking time to speak with me this morning before you get back to your writing. Is it just a matter of, let me take a week here and write as much as I possibly can while you're traveling, or are you writing on planes and trains, or how are you getting your writing in?
For some reason, I get so much work done on trains and planes and boats. It's for some reason, I just always seem to get creatively inspired while traveling, which made it really hard during the pandemic because I was just home and trying to work while at home. While you think, oh, I have all of this time since I'm not traveling, it was like pulling teeth trying to get writing done when I didn't get to travel. So now that I'm traveling again, I'm really appreciating that time and the creativity that comes with being in a new place. Because I think that always inspires me. Being someplace new where I've never been before always seems to get my creative juices flowing.
I've read elsewhere that you're on average looking for around 50 to 60 pages a month, and that you do everything handwritten to force yourself to do at least another draft when you're typing it up later, right?
Yes, I start longhand. I use a fountain pen because fountain pens are cool, and I write longhand, and I'll write a chapter, and usually it's just kind of stream of consciousness. But then as I type it into the computer, it gets a complete revision, and I really hone it. And then I'll revise it multiple times until I'm satisfied with that chapter. Then I'll move to the next chapter, which means going back to the notebook. I love doing it that way. I think if I stayed on the computer, my entire life would be looking at a screen, and I don't want that. I like the idea of varying it a little bit. There are times when I'm really in the zone that I'll actually just dictate because it's coming that quickly. And so between the dictation and the handwriting, that's pretty much how I always start. The process always moves to the computer eventually, but never starts there.
Does that make you feel at all nervous or vulnerable that, hey, if I spill my coffee on this notebook, I'm done? I don't have it backed up on the cloud.
Yeah, and that's happened. I've lost notebooks. If I wait too long to transcribe it, I can't read my handwriting, so I have no idea what I wrote. So it's like trying to read a Rorschach, trying to figure out what I was trying to say. Yeah, that's always a concern. So I do that. I try to do that transcription fairly quickly. Once I'm done writing that chapter, I go back and I'll start to type it in and really hone it.
When you've lost notebooks, and I'm sorry to bring up this traumatic experience, I'm sure. I had the experience, a computer our house was broken into and a computer was stolen, and I didn't yet have the cloud. So I lost first part of a novel, and I was fortunate enough, I rewrote it. I'm like, okay, well, this version's probably better. And if it's not, well, I'll never know because the other one's gone.
Oh, it always is. It's always better.
When
I'm firmly convinced.
Do you go back and do a new version, or do you just say, okay, well, that's gone, next story?
No, I go back and just redo it, and I feel that it's better. I mean, the time that really happened was years ago. I was working on I think it was Speeding Bullet, many, many years ago, earlier in my career. And I was writing in the notebook, and I hadn't been transcribing. I was just writing it straight into the notebook. And I had about maybe 50 pages, and I left the notebook in the seat back of an airplane. Never got it back. So I had to go back and redo the whole thing. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to that book. At least that's what I tell myself.
Well, I know you said elsewhere that you write down some ideas, that you have some idea, but unless it's a burning passion, you're probably not going to, that's not going to be the story that you write anyway. Am I paraphrasing that more or less correct?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to have many more ideas than I have time to write. And not every idea gets the attention. And the ones that get the attention are the ones that are screaming and just seem to just feel like this is the story that must be told. I try not to write stories that I don't have that kind of passion for, because first of all, it'll be harder to write a story if I don't have passion for it. And if I'm not passionate about a story, that's gonna get right into the pages. I mean, you're gonna feel that lack of passion when you read it. So I want all the things that I write to have that sense of urgency while I'm writing it, and I'm hoping that translates right to the reader.
And so, right now, as I'm talking to you, when you're spending a week and you're focused just on writing before you get back to traveling and the tour, what does your workday look like?
Well, let's see. Today, I was doing a lot of logistical things in terms of organizing my thoughts, taking care of emails and business things that need to be cleared out of the way before I can actually put all of my attention into writing. And then once I feel as if I sort of have those, everything's kind of held back and I can actually focus in, tomorrow, I'll probably get up early and spend at least 3 hours writing. Then I'll go and swim or exercise at the gym. And I'll have something to eat, and I'll come back to write for another 3 or 4 hours. Then I'll take another break, and I'll try to write in the evening for another 3 hours. I mean, it's on days where I'm really focusing on writing, I try to get around 9 to 10 hours of writing done. The other day when we had this train ride from Prague to Frankfurt, which is like a 7-hour train ride. And we booked that specifically so that we could get the chance to go across the countryside and see Europe. But also, I knew during those 7 hours I was going to be writing, and I got an awful lot of work done. So trying to get at least my goal when I'm having writing days is to get at least 6 hours of writing done in a writing day. Don't always manage to do that. There's some days when I just don't have the creativity, or there are too many other things going on, both outside around me or in my own head, that I can't focus in. But when I can, I try to take advantage of that creativity.
When we're talking 6 hours, are we talking just pen, literally, since you're handwriting, pen to page, or is that count like doing a little bit of research on the internet or whatever it is you need to do?
It counts all of that. I mean, usually I'll do the handwriting, and then once I'm done with a section of a chapter, or then I'll switch to the computer and type it in. If I need to do research, I'll do research during the process. But it's just focusing on the story in one way or another.
Okay, I wanted to clarify, because later I'll be beating myself up that I'm checking something on the internet like, no, Neal Shusterman said 6 hours straight. So
no, that's the goal. That's the goal. Like I said, I very rarely actually meet that goal. There are writers I know who, like Jonathan Mayberry, he writes 2,000 words a day, no matter what. That's his, no matter what's going on in his life, 2,000 words a day. Wow, I can't do that. I can't be so regimented as to be able to get that done. There's entire weeks when I can't get writing done, and then there's days where I just have endless energy for multiple days to get work done, and where the creativity is there. So for me, it really comes in fits and starts.
And when you start your day with doing the business and the emails, an issue I run into is if I send out a bunch of emails, sooner or later people start responding. And now I've got a bunch of responses that I've just created more work for myself. Whereas if I push that off to the end of the day, do you just block all that out? You take yourself completely, make yourself unavailable while you're being creative, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I wish I had the determination and the ability to just not look at the emails and not, look at all that. The one thing that I have managed to do is I've managed to take a lot of social media off my plate because, it's a black hole for me. If I start on social media, that'll be it for the day. And so I have a social media manager that posts stuff and then sends me stuff that fans respond, responses from fans. And if I have anything that I want to post, I just send it to her, and she figures out which platforms to put it on. And so I sort of keep a little bit of a distance from social media most of the time. But when it comes to emails, yeah, I'm always checking those emails. I'm always getting interrupted by things coming in that demand my attention immediately, and so I try not to, but I have the same problem that you have. Those emails just seem to be calling to me, even if I'm trying to write.
I mean, 50 books, it's working out. It's getting done. As far as your process, when you start with an idea, do you sit down and write out? Are you a plotter or a pantser? How much of a plan do you have? Do you have like a set goal? I'm going to get to this plot point by the end of the day, or is it just let me see what happens? How's it go?
It's a combination of both. I try not to start until I have the story pretty much worked out. It's not always that way, but sometimes I'm not sure where the story is going until I get to know the characters and set up those opening scenes. Then I have to stop. There's a book that I'm working on now. I'm about 50 pages into it. I know the characters now. I really know the situation well and the world that the story is being told in. But now I have to figure out the whole story. So now I've had to stop writing, and for the next few days, I'm just going to be focusing on figuring that story out. And then I'll sit down and start writing again, and the characters will invariably start taking the story in places I wasn't expecting them to. And so I have to throw away my outline and re-outline and restructure it. And so it's a matter of plotting it out, but also being willing to throw away the outline when the story starts going in different directions.
So what does figuring out a story look like? Is that just writing out an outline? Do you like the scene in the movie where the person's trying to figure out the conspiracy and you've got little bits all over the wall? Or what is your process in figuring out a story?
It's a lot of questions. What does the character want at this point in time? What are the obstacles in the character's way? If the character gets this one thing, will they still feel the need to move forward in the story? Do I need, right now I'm working on trying to figure out who are the secondary characters. I've identified, the three main characters of this story, but who else becomes involved, and what purposes do they serve in the story? And ultimately, I realized that one of the characters is going to have to die. Which character is going to die? Is it going to be a main character? Or is it going to be one of the secondary characters? And I don't want it to be the cliche, the best friend character that always dies to prove that the situation is serious. Don't want to go with one of those tropes. So it's just posing a lot of questions and not necessarily answering them, but sort of understanding what questions I need to ask in order to move the story forward.
I know your stories are very thought-provoking. You ask lots of psychological questions. What would happen if no one died ever, except when we say they die? All sorts of things that are going to take home. In fact, I heard you talk elsewhere about how a story is kind of like a steak, and you come because you're hungry, and the entertainment, it satisfies your hunger, but then there's nutrition in there. There's themes. There's deeper thoughts that you're going to take, and you're going to digest those later. When you're at this stage, what's the ratio on what you're looking at? Are you focused primarily on, let me make sure I entertain everybody so that you at least get fed, and then worry about the nutrition? Or do you start thinking about, what are my themes? What are the deeper questions that I have? And let me work those in, or is it all part of a piece?
It starts with the themes. What questions am I trying to ask? What am I trying to say? And what are the characters going to have to go through to make that happen? And then I think, okay, now how am I going to say that in an interesting way that keeps people wanting to read it? So it always starts with the theme and the overall concept of the story. And then I have to figure out how to make that interesting.
And how do you, do you have some, I assume you've got some kind of rules, 50 books in, you'd have to have, about when you're spending too much time on theme and questions, and you need to make sure that you get your suspense ramped up. I mean, what checks and balances do you have to make sure that you're being interesting and thought-provoking without being preachy?
It's kind of this internal modulation. I kind of always, people will ask me, how do you know how much of this to do and how much of that? It's just a matter of feel. It's like it's like cooking without a recipe. You just know that you need this much garlic and this much oregano, but you've never actually measured it. It's something I think that just comes with having done it. And it's hard to explain except when you see it. Just like if I'll read something, like if I'm working with other up and coming writers who are wanting to learn the craft, I can put it into words then. Like I can say, oh well, you're spending too much time developing this the setting when by this point the character needs to take over and we need to have the character do something. But otherwise it's just sort of something that you have a feel for. And it's just a matter of generating that feel just by doing it.
I love that answer as a fan, but also I hear part of it is the secret to being Neal Shusterman is be Neal Shusterman. Fair enough.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from my editors over the years, because I'll hear my editors as I'm writing something. I'll hear my editors in my head saying, I'll hear Stephanie Lurie saying, you're going on and on because you're falling in love with your description again. Or I'll hear David Gale say, get to the point. Or I'll hear Justin Chanda, in my head saying, remember what the story is about. Or Rosemary Brosnan, who was my editor on Challenger Deep and Game Changer and Bruiser. Challenging me to make this difficult concept work, and telling me that it's not quite there yet, and you need to focus more on the craft of making this difficult story work. So those voices of my editors in my head drive me and assist me. And then when I get the book done, then they're not in my head anymore. Then they're actually out there making these suggestions and comments that I learn from. Because a good editor's job is to illuminate the problems of a story. And once it's illuminated, well, then it's up to you as the writer to fix it. But if you have a really good editor who's really good at illuminating those problems, you take that with you, and you can remember the next time you're in that situation, you can remember what the problem was. And they're already sort of there in your head illuminating it for you.
I love the idea that if you're talking to your editor now in real life and they say, well, I think you should do this, you say, no, the you in my head said this was fine. So, well, that you mentioned Justin Chanda, who is Gleanings is dedicated to, yes?
Yes.
So what transitioning, I want to talk about the book, and I want to talk about you collaborating with other authors, but I'm fascinated, what is it that Justin Chanda did to be worthy of this dedication and putting together Gleanings? What does an editor have to do to get a book dedicated to them?
Well, Justin is the publisher of Simon & Schuster Books for Young Readers, and he has been a supporter of my work from the very beginning. And I've only recently had the opportunity to work with him as an editor, because he doesn't do that much editing anymore because he's so busy being the publisher. But I had my editor was David Gale, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And so Justin filled in working on The Toll with me, and just was so fantastic and so insightful that I asked him, I know, you don't have all that much time to edit anymore, but could you continue editing me? And so, he worked with my son Jarrod and I on Roxy and on Gleanings, and it's been a fantastic experience. And to have someone who believes in you as much as Justin believes in me has been an amazing thing for my career. And I consider him a friend, and so dedicating it to him comes from the heart.
What I'm hearing is, as we've been talking, is although it's your name on the cover of these books, sounds like there's a whole group of people that have gone into making Neal Shusterman at this point.
Yeah, it's not this solo thing. There's a lot of people involved every step of the way, and I'm grateful for all the people at all the publishing companies that have believed in my work and have encouraged me and have offered criticism. One of the most important things is criticism. There's sometimes I read books and I think, oh, this is a great author, but the editor was afraid to tell them that something isn't working. And you can tell when something needed a little bit more work. I'm grateful that I have editors that will tell me what needs to be done in a book, even if it's hard. I'm grateful for art departments that come up with amazing covers. I just love the covers of the books, and it's, I just feel very grateful to have so many people who have been supporting my work for all of these years.
Does that fill you with maybe just a little tinge of fear when you encounter that in somebody else's book, that, hey, I'm 50 books in, there's going to be somebody you're going to come across that's going to be a little bit intimidated by you, obviously not Justin, but somebody who might be a little intimidated and won't speak up. How do you protect against that and make sure that you're continuing to get the feedback to keep you honest?
Well, so far I haven't had that problem. I think the editors that I've worked with for the past 15 years have been really, really good, and aren't afraid. I think they get to the position that they're at because they're not afraid to tell writers, what they need to hear. And so and plus I retain really, friendly relationships with all of my editors. It's never adversarial. So I don't think I'm all that intimidating. I try not to be.
Who reads your manuscript first? Who do you go to? How many folks are weighing in before you get to the editor?
There's usually a lot, maybe not weighing in on the whole book, but on certain chapters that I'm concerned about. I have a writing group, and they see a lot of the pages that I'm working with. I have a number of friends, other authors who I'll send stuff to. If there's things that I feel really need to be vetted by someone who is in an ethnic group or a social group that I'm not a part of, I make sure that I find another writer who is, so that I can make sure that I'm being authentic and respectful. So and that's all part, I consider that part of the research in writing is making sure that I'm authentic. So there are quite a few people involved before it ever gets to the editor, and then it's a relationship between me and the editor.
Gotcha. And I know that you had talked a bit when you were writing Game Changer, which has just that wonderful premise. I promised you not to torture you by summarizing your books. What's the premise of Game Changer?
So Game Changer is about a high school football player who bounces into alternate universes because he hits so hard. He's a tackle, and every time he hits really hard, he bounces into a parallel universe where everything is the same except for one small thing. Now, I had this idea for a very long time, but it was one of those ideas that wasn't screaming to be told until I thought, what if every world that he bounces into is a different social reality where he has to face different social realities that he never had to before? So what if he's like this, this kid who doesn't really get racism, or who doesn't, not that he's racist, but he just doesn't understand what it's like to be, African American in the United States. And his best friend is African American and is always telling him, dude, you just don't get it. Well, he ends up bouncing into a world where Brown versus the Board of Education went the other way, and the US is still segregated. And so his best friend is no longer in this new world, his best friend. He's not even in the school because whites and blacks don't go to school together in this world that he's bounced into. And he has to come to terms with that and realize that one of the things he realizes in that world is that it's not as different from our world as he thought it would be. And he starts to understand the concept of institutionalized racism that we have in our world. And so he bounces through these different social realities. There's one world in which he is, everything in the world seems exactly the way it was from the world he just came from, except that he's starting to realize that he's attracted to other guys. In this world, he's gay. And he, for the first time in his life, has to experience what it's like to have same-sex attraction and how that affects his entire being, his entire life. And ultimately, in that world, he comes out to his parents and to his school. And so he's now seeing life from an entirely new perspective. And so the goal in Game Changer was to take this kid and have him see perspectives that he never would have before. Hopefully, that when kids read it, maybe kids who are like that, who don't get these other perspectives, will read it, identify with the character, and finally be able to sort of see the world through other people's eyes.
And I know that that is in development with Netflix's TV series, and you've been co-writing the pilot episode. Where are we at with that? Are we hoping to see it soon?
It's still in development with Netflix. I'm co-writing it with Brian Yorkie, who is a fantastic writer. He's the guy who brought 13 Reasons Why to life on Netflix. But the thing that was my favorite thing of his is the stage show, the musical that he wrote, Next to Normal, which is my all-time favorite musical. So when I found out I was going to be writing with the guy who wrote Next to Normal, it was really hard not to just fanboy all over him when I met him, because I'm very excited to be working with him, and he's really, really smart, really a good writer. And so the collaboration has been fantastic. Netflix, though, has been going through a lot of difficult things. So whether or not they make it, there's no telling, but we'll see.
I was just wondering if you were going to convince him that there needs to be at least one episode where the alternate universe it's a musical. Everybody sings.
That'll be the second season.
When you're working on a character like that, which there's so many different perspectives that you can't possibly have them all. I know that you went out and you reached out to people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Mm-hmm.
You worked with friends of different races, people who had been victims of abuse. When you're working with somebody like that and you want to get their perspective to keep you honest, make sure that what you're writing is a fair representation, but you also, you've got your story, you want to be true to your plot, your character. What's the balance that you're striking? How many people do you need to go to make sure that you're not getting just a one-off opinion, but that you're getting a fair representation of perspectives that you yourself don't have?
I mean, for each perspective, I'm usually going to 2 or 3 different people. And sometimes I get conflicting things. And so I ask them, okay, well, this other person said this, how do you feel about that? And so it becomes a little bit of a dialogue, and almost sometimes a little bit of a roundtable where we're discussing these ideas. but yeah, it's important to get multiple perspectives on it. And the things that aren't working, I take that very seriously. I mean, even if the story required something to be a certain way, then it comes back, from a friend who's reading it saying, no, you can't do that. You can't, that is, not going to work. It's insensitive. Then I got to change it, because that is the most important thing, is that it is authentic and sensitive to the issues that it's addressing. And I did have to do that multiple times in Game Changer to make sure that I was being sensitive in the right way. And of course, there's still going to be people who are going to be offended no matter what you do. I know that with Game Changer, I offended people on the left. How dare I write about an LGBTQ plus person, or how dare I write from a woman's point of view, who's been in an abusive relationship. And then on the other hand, I was smashed by the extreme right, saying this is just nothing but a extreme left, this social justice screed. So I pissed off both sides. So I think I must be doing something right.
Well, could you ever write anything that's going to make everybody happy?
No, can't be done. Although I always want everybody to be happy, but you can't please all the people all the time.
Well, what's your own personal barometer for I did what I set out to accomplish? Or do you ever feel that way?
I mean, I do. I mean, I like with Game Changer, I feel that I accomplished what I set out to accomplish. And if people and if there's people who don't get it, or people who don't connect with it, I just think about the people that do, and the comments that I've heard from people who have really been positively influenced by it with any of the books. I mean, of course, I love hearing the positive things. And anytime I do hear something negative, it always sticks, it sticks in my craw a little bit, because it's like the reviews, you can have a dozen great reviews and then you get one bad review. That's the one that you remember. And so so I'm always trying to sort of overcome that.
Well, I know you've got your social media manager who hopefully helps to insulate you a little bit from the tweets from just random internet people that are looking for somebody to be mean to. And
I don't want to be insulated, because I want to know what people are thinking, but I also need to take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes people, exactly what you said, they're just looking for somebody to be mean to. They're getting their own frustrations out and finding it easy to get it out on you.
Let's talk about Gleanings, which is available now, esteemed audience. And true to my word, I'm not going to torture you by telling you about your universe. What does esteemed audience need to know about Gleanings?
These are stories within the world of Scythe. For those of you who haven't read Scythe, it's a world where humanity has conquered death and we get to live forever. And the only way that you can die is to be chosen for death by a Scythe, which is sort of they're like these Jedi kind of characters that are their job is to thin out the population. And they are revered and respected, and they're so powerful. Unfortunately, there are some bad ones. And the story itself is about trying to get rid of the bad Scythes and bring it back to being what it was meant to be. Now, these stories are stories from various different points of view. I take some of the characters that are some of everyone's favorite characters. Scythe Curie, for instance, she's one of the main Scythes, and we get to see her as a teenager. We get to see when she first became a Scythe. We get to see the bad guy, Scythe Goddard, when he was a creepy 16-year-old on the Mars colony, because we know that the Mars colony was destroyed in this horrible, tragic accident. But we've also come to understand that maybe it wasn't an accident and that he was somehow involved. Well, now we get to see that story. There are stories that I co-wrote with my son Jarrod and his partner Sophia Lapuente. There's a story that I co-wrote with David Yoon, author David Yoon, and it was just fun getting the chance to write with him. So there were a total of 5 stories that I co-authored, and the rest I wrote by myself. Total of 13 stories, 14 with the special edition. That's the Barnes & Noble special edition, because they wanted their own story. And so I wrote a story for them as well. But the stories are just, some of them are funny, some of them are dark, and they're just exploring the corners of this world that I wasn't able to explore in the trilogy.
And in exploring the world a little bit more, has that got you thinking, well, maybe rather than a trilogy, it needs to be 7 books, 8 books? Have you thought about maybe it's time to get back in?
I have thought about it, but I have not said yes or no yet. A lot of fans are asking for a prequel, so I'm considering that. The thing is, I don't want to write something just to write it, just because it's there. I got to be excited about it. I have to have that sense of passion. There has to be something that's making me want to revisit this world. So that might happen. I mean, I might write another side story, but right now I have other books that I'm working on. I'm starting, a brand new series, and I don't want to give that up to write another Scythe book.
Gotcha. That it's still on the table, but fans will have to be patient, and it will be better when you're excited, when it comes directly from your own enthusiasm, rather than we're all waiting.
And I know that we're all waiting feeling after Thunderhead. The day after Thunderhead was published, I was already getting emails from people saying, when's the 3rd book coming? And it's like, it was just published yesterday. I need time to write it.
But I stayed up all night reading it, and I want the next one now. When you're opening up a world that's been not more or less exclusively yours. I mean, I know that you've had editors collaborating, and your writing group people have weighed in, but it's been your story. But now you're opening it up to your son Jarrod, to these other folks that you're collaborating with in Gleanings. Is that an experience of I don't know, somebody is coming over and they want to see your most personal stuff in your home? What is it like to open up and share this world with someone else?
Well, I mean, all of them have read the trilogy, and so they know the world. Sometimes, in the writing process, they'll do things that don't quite fit with the world, but that's part of the collaborative process. I'll rework it to make sure that it fits the rules of the world. And I've been, pretty impressed by the ability of my collaborators to really work within the world.
Gotcha. So it's all still kind of friendly conversation. I mean, is it
Yeah.
a nice feeling that, hey, look how much you love my world, and you've taken it and run with it, and I don't completely hate what you've done. So this is great.
Yeah, it's been positive all the way around. I mean, I'm also was working with a friend of mine, Michelle Nolden, who I've written things with before, and so she took a story. I mean, the story that she was working on was based on the idea that Antarctica, or there's one region in Antarctica that has where the entire community collectively dreams. And so it's sort of like this Inception kind of story that takes place within this communal dream, because in that region, scythes don't glean you while you're awake, they glean you in your dreams. And so if you get killed by a scythe in your dreams, then you have to report to that scythe in the morning to be killed. And writing that story with her was just so much fun. Just the combination of both of our imaginations going into the story. And it was the same way with all the collaborators. Just it's like, here's my playground. Come join me in my playground. And it was fun. I also had the opportunity to collaborate with my daughter Joelle. And she wrote a verse, a poem for Gleanings that is actually the opening piece. And it's she's a writer also. She's working on her own novel, and it was really fun to have her be able to contribute. And I also worked with a friend of mine by the name of Mike Payne, who specializes in writing animal stories. And a lot of fans always ask me, do pets get to live forever in the world of Scythe? And so I thought the perfect person to tell a story about pets in the world of Scythe was Mike Payne. And so I got the chance to collaborate with him on a story called Never Work with Animals.
Did your daughter know that she was going to be the opening poem when she wrote that?
No, she didn't. And what's funny is she wrote a whole much longer thing. She started it with this piece that was supposed to be like a journal entry in a Scythe journal, and then wrote a story. But the journal entry by itself was so strong. I just told her to, you know, why don't you just restructure it as in verse? And she did it, and it's just the perfect opening of the book.
And is she going to be writing? Well, I know she's working on her own novel now, right? So she's going to eventually be collaborating with you on a full novel, maybe, or
if she wants, you know. And my other daughter is an artist, so I might do a graphic novel with her. You know, I can't give that opportunity to one and not to all of them. You know, I have to be fair to everybody. So I also write stories with my son Brendan, and we've written short stories that have gone into different anthologies. But everyone will have the opportunity, if they want it, to work with me on something.
How can non-family members get in on this? You were talking earlier about you have so many ideas and you're not going to use all of them. Like, well, if you follow you around, can we have some?
We'll toss them out here and there. They're not all good ideas.
Good enough. If I can say based on an idea by, that's
even based on a bad idea by Neal Shusterman. Yeah.
Based on an idea he felt was not worth completing a novel, but this guy 3 books in now with the anthology connected. When your enthusiasm returns and you do sit down for number 4, 5, and 6, we're promising it right here exclusively on this show. But if you were to sit down, how do you keep track of your world building? How do you make sure that you're not contradicting past you, or do you occasionally get to a point where like, oh, past me set this up and I hate him because it prevents me from doing what I want to do now? How do you keep track of all of that?
Well, it's something that I've come to realize is that these obstacles that you've ended up putting in front of yourself actually become tools that you can use. When I wrote Unwind, I never expected it to be a series. And so I ended it in such a way that sort of really closed a lot of things off. And so when I finally decided to write a second book, which ended up becoming, 4 more books, I was sort of just stuck with how I ended Unwind. And at first I was frustrated, but then as I started to work with it, I realized that it forced me to think out of the box for where these characters go in the next book. But there are times when I wish I wouldn't have done something, but now it's already cast in stone, and I can't pretend like it did, and I didn't make that rule in that world.
And of course, got to ask about the movie. Where are we at in terms of the Scythe movie?
It is in development, in that interminable period where it's being written and rewritten, and the script was thrown out, and now they have a new writer working on it. Steven Spielberg is shepherding the project, which blows me away because he was my childhood hero. To know that he even knows I exist and has read my book is amazing enough. The fact that he wants to make my book into a movie just blows me away. And so he's shepherding the project, and he has there's a writer that's on it, a new writer, and we're waiting for the script to come in, and hopefully the script will be good. And I'm just keeping my fingers crossed.
Can you use that as an opportunity to go meet him? That way, whatever happens with the movie, you get the experience of meeting.
I told my agents that I want to have a sit down with Steven Spielberg, and they said we'll figure out a way to make that happen.
Me too, Mr. Spielberg. If you're listening, if you ever write a YA or middle grade novel, come on the show. Fingers crossed. If fans are excited, what should they be doing to help the process? Is there anyone they should be contacting on social media, or a hashtag they should use?
Oh, I don't know. It's the last thing you want to do is to send your fandom attacking a studio, because that can backfire.
Well, then it sounds like the thing that fans should do is read the books again and wait patiently.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I'm hoping it'll happen.
With any of these projects, when I know you're actively involved, certainly with Game Changer and some of the others, and you have the experience. You're not writing screenplays. You're writing books. The experience is the book that you created. Is a movie just sort of, well, that I hope it works out, but either way, the book will still exist? Or do you want to be involved and make that the best possible representation? How do you feel about your work being adapted?
Well, I do want to be involved, but I don't necessarily always want to write it because there's just not enough time in the day. I mean, there were points at which I was attached to write projects, and I ended up being the bottleneck. I slowed the project down because I had so many other things to work on. So I don't want to be the person who is preventing the project from moving forward. And if there's writers and a director who is excited about it and passionate about it, yeah, I'm fine to sit back and let them do their thing. I just want to be involved. I want to be able to sit on the set. I want to be able to give my comments and notes. And then there are the ones that I feel like I want to write, or at least I want to have the first shot at writing. I wrote the first draft of Challenger Deep, and then they went on and they hired Will McCormick to do a new draft. He's an Academy Award-winning writer. I'm thrilled to have him involved. Wrote the first draft with my son Jarrod of Dry for Paramount, and they felt that it needed to be bigger because in order to make it a theatrical release, it had to have this sense of size and explosions and plane crashes and all of that stuff. And so they brought in Jason Fuchs, who wrote Wonder Woman, to do a revision of the script that really made it a studio project. Had no problem with that. It's whatever it takes to get it made. And I've heard a lot of authors who will complain about their books being made into terrible movies. Yeah, but every single book that gets made into a movie ends up becoming a bestseller. And then people will say, well, it's the movie, the book was better than the movie. Well, that means that they read the book. So on one level, I like to say I see TV shows and movies as a sales tool for the book. I'd love to have a fantastic movie made or a fantastic TV show made from my books, but I'll settle for a bad one.
It's a mediocre movie version is still going to sell a lot of books and introduce people to your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy that. I read Congo by Michael Crichton because I couldn't believe that the book would be as bad as the movie. And it wasn't. So, well, I wanted to ask about collaborating with your son, Jarrod Shusterman, who, as luck would have it, assuming this goes well, is going to be here on Friday. Esteemed audience, you won't hear it till January because that's when the book comes up. And I'm going to be talking with him and with Sofia Lapuente about their new book, Retro, available in January. Go ahead and get your copy pre-ordered. So when you're collaborating with your son, I assume just because of the nature of family relationship that there's always going to be a little bit of trauma, a little bit of tension there. Part of this argument is the thing you didn't buy for me in my when I was 6 for Christmas, whatever. When you're working with your son, how do you leave that family relationship not at the door? I don't think you can completely do that, but put it aside the fact so you can see each other as equals, collaborating on a book. How do you manage that?
What's really interesting about that is that's the easy part. We can have arguments about different things, as fathers and sons do, family stuff. But when we sit down to write, that's it. That's all aside. Now we are professional and we're bonding over this writing process. And so, there have been times when it has helped our relationship because we can put stuff aside and focus on the writing and appreciate each other as collaborators and as, and his talents. Jarrod is amazingly talented, and writing with him has been an absolute pleasure. We just write together really well, and I've enjoyed every last minute of it. And now he's sort of left the writing nest, so to speak, because now he's written Retro, with his partner, Sophie. And it's really thrilling to watch, them spread their wings and fly. And I'm just standing back, I'm their cheerleader, just standing back and watching them with this new book, and just very, very excited for them.
And I mean, I'm assuming that if there's anybody that knows how to write in the Neal Shusterman way, it's got to be him, right? He grew up knowing.
Yeah, but he doesn't. But that's the thing, is he wants to write his own thing. He doesn't want to write in the Neal Shusterman way, which is fine. I mean, when we're working together, that's what we're doing. I mean, we're creating something together. Now he's written something that is his own style, the combination of the style of him and Sophie, and they're going off in their own creative direction, which is exactly what, as it should be.
Well, it's got to be just enormously gratifying you raised him right. He's a writer, my God, of all the things he could have been. So that's, every time he publishes, that's an attribute to your great parenting. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'll talk to him on Friday, and we'll get his take on that as well. So I wanted to ask you about a quote from Thunderhead, because it's kind of an obsession of mine. And you've given this a lot more thought, I would imagine, than I have. But in Thunderhead, you say that death must exist for life to have meaning. And I've always seen that as an argument that we make because we know we're going to die, and there isn't an alternative. Like, maybe if I could live forever, I might have a new quote for you. Definitely live forever, never worry about death. The end. But we'll never know, because I'm not going to have that. But you've written this entire trilogy, and now this anthology around this question: why? Why does death give life meaning? How does it give your life meaning?
Well, I think, of course, nobody wants to admit that they're going to die. I mean, nobody, but it's something that we all face. And one of the things that I wanted to do was not so much show that death gives life meaning as what we lose when there is no more sense of mortality. And is it worth it? And I really tried to dive into, do a deep dive on that concept. If we no longer have pain, if we no longer have that sense of that ticking clock towards our end, do things become less urgent? We don't have to do it today because there's always going to be a tomorrow. Is there less passion in the things that we do? Does art become bland because we no longer have the passion that that drove artists? And so those were some of the things that I was exploring. And I'm not saying that it's a terrible thing. I'm saying that that even when we get something that is positive, there's always going to be a consequence that we're going to have to face. Are the consequences worth it or not? I don't have an answer to that. People ask me, would I want to live in a world, the world of Scythe? I would say my answer is yes. Yeah, even with the things that we lose, I would want to live forever. And I know there's a lot of people who say, no, I would never want to live forever. But the thing is, you go into a doctor's office and the doctor tells you, I'm sorry, you have 6 months to live. But here's a pill you can take. And if you take this pill, you're not going to die in 6 months. And matter of fact, you're not going to die at all. Or you can just die slowly and painfully over the next 6 months. What are you going to choose? I think most people are going to choose to go on, but we're going to have to face the consequences of that. And it's not so far away, because we are at a place where people are actually starting to figure out how to lengthen human life in major ways. I just read an article, fans send me a lot of articles about this stuff. And they show up in my news feed too. It's like, like the Thunderhead is there pointing to these things, they've just come up with a pill that can potentially extend human life by 30 years. I think Jeff Bezos is working on a project to, an immortality project. Eventually it's going to happen. It's going to be one of these things that shows up on our news feed one morning, Elon Musk has solved the mystery of aging, and we can live forever if we buy a Tesla. It's going to be something as simple as that. But once we've cracked it, we're stuck with it. The human race will be technically immortal. We're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. So Scythe is sort of one way that we try to deal with the consequences.
One thing that, many things that annoy me just a little bit is I feel like we're just on the precipice of that. I can see it coming, and I might be might be the generation that just misses it. If you'd been born a decade later,
Yeah.
you could have got that pill. It would have been fine, but nope.
Yeah, that's frustrating. They say if you put any credence into the singularity theory, that the year 2042 is the year that we are transformed and computing power becomes immense, and that's when the Thunderhead basically comes to life, which is that's the year that I chose for the Thunderhead to come to life in the Scythe books. But of course, you got to live to 2042. You got to make it that far.
Well, you're swimming, you're eating right. Who knows?
Ryan, I'm going for it.
If I'm honest with myself, the odds weren't that great for me to make it to this point. So, what can you tell us about I Am the Walrus, Noah Prime Book 1, which is coming here April of 23?
I Am the Walrus is the first book in the Noah files, which is what the series is being called. Co-written by me and Eric Elfman. Eric and I wrote the Accelerati trilogy, which is Tesla's Attic, Edison's Alley, and Hawking's Hallway, which are three of my favorites. I love working with Eric. He is so much fun to work with. Basically, we're just having fun. We make each other laugh, and then we come up with a book. He's my best friend, and it's just really fun writing with him. And this new one is about this kid who when he gets stressed out, starts taking on all of the attributes of different animals, all of the defense mechanisms. So it's like he's surrounded by bullies in the hallway. Suddenly he finds himself keeling over, like a possum, which freaks the bullies out and they run away, which is exactly the point of it. And he doesn't know why this is happening to him. He gets startled and suddenly he sprays like a skunk and fills the room with this, this terrible, funk. What he ultimately finds out is that he has the DNA of every creature on Earth, that he is a human ARC that has that they can recreate every creature from him. But then he and his friends come to realize, you don't make an ARC unless something really, really bad is about to happen. And so he has to try to figure out what's going on and why he was created and has all this. At the same time, trying to deal with all of these unexpected responses that he has. So it's also a little bit of a metaphor of the changes you go through as you go through adolescence, and sort of taken to extremes. And it's told in a humorous style, like the Accelerati trilogy, sort of a little bit of a Douglas Adams kind of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of sense of humor, which we both love. And it's always wonderful when someone reviews our books and say, it's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but with with animals. It's kind of fun.
I love the idea that if you started spraying like a skunk, most people would be immediately repelled, but there would be someone, humans are so wonderfully varied, who had never found you attractive before, but now
well, see, there's
interested.
There's the girl who at first she really doesn't like him, but the more weird things that he does, the more situations she finds herself in with him, the more she is curiously interested in him. There's this one moment where they're stuck together in an industrial freezer, and he starts developing blubber that just swells like a walrus, and it keeps them both warm until someone finally lets them out of the freezer the next day. And she just finds, as horrified as she is by that, she's just really interested in him now.
Of course. Well, I wanted to ask you earlier when you were talking about writing a humor column and coming upon people reading it who had no idea who you were. Now, of course, you're a bit more prominent. You've got 50 books out in the world. Have you ever come across somebody reading something by you, either then or now or whenever, and that was your line? Like, hey, I wrote that. Well, the conversation has started. Perhaps you find me a little bit more interesting than you would have before.
There are times when, and it doesn't happen all that often, because like most of the time people are reading on like Kindles now. So it's like trying to, if I'm ever on vacation and like there's a whole lot of people reading books, I'll always walk around and just see if there's anybody reading one of my books. And every once in a while they are, but I always have to be careful because usually it's a teenager. And I don't want to go up to somebody and just start a conversation and say, hey, I wrote that book you're reading, because that's just a little bit creepy. And so I'm always very careful. Sometimes I'm in a bookstore and I see people with the book, and then I'll go up to the bookseller and say, you might want to tell them that the author is here and can sign it for them.
Oh, that's a smart way to get them to be approached by somebody else.
Yeah, so that's kind of it's fun when that happens.
That's a good safety tip. Authors follow that. So my approach is going to result in, I was about to leave you a 1-star review, but now that you're here, I'll just tell you. Could backfire terribly.
Good.
Well, I know that you wrote some young adult novels set in the X-Files universe. An esteemed audience knows I have to ask, because I ask everybody who comes on the show, but who better than an X-Files alumni to ask Neal Shusterman, have you ever seen a ghost and or a flying saucer?
I've never seen a flying saucer. I've maybe seen a ghost. I'm not 100% convinced, but I don't discount the possibility. I'm not a skeptic in saying that this is not real, but at the same time, I'm not saying definitely this is real. I think the possibilities of these things exist. There's more in this universe that we don't understand. And if there wasn't, it would be a really lousy universe. There's got to be things out there that are beyond our understanding that we haven't figured out. And, a lot of my stories are about life and death and the afterlife and what is the soul? These are all these metaphysical questions that I'm always asking, knowing that, I'm not going to figure out the answers, but posing the questions makes life a little bit more interesting.
Well, I know this, for me at least, is a moving target, but what is your current take on death? Do you have strong thoughts on, is there an afterlife, or is it just all over and thank God it was as great as it was until then? Or where are you at?
I go back and forth. I want to believe that there's more. I think that whatever it is, it's beyond our ability to comprehend, and different belief systems try to capture something that is beyond our ability to comprehend, and so but I believe that there is reason to existence. Sometimes you look at the universe and how huge, how immense the universe is, and some people are terrified by that. I find that comforting, because to think that there is something that is so much larger than our ability to comprehend means that there is more out there than that we don't see, and that we're in some way a part of that. And it gives me comfort to think that. But then, of course, there's the fear that, once we're gone, that's it, and there is no continuation to our existence. That's, I think everybody fears that. But I think, I want to believe that there's more. And I'm always exploring all the different possibilities.
I think that's actually the least scary option, is that it's just over and it's just everything's blinked out. It's dark now. Oh, great. All those things that were bothering me that I worried about, no more. Forget it. It's done. And if you're a really religious person who had a strong feeling, you don't know that you're wrong. It was never a problem. That ghost experience that you had, is that something you can share, or is that better say for a short story or a book?
Oh, it was when I first moved to Mexico when I was 16, and I had one of those I can't remember what you call them, but you're awake, but you can't move. You're sleep paralysis. And I was in a hotel, and I remember I felt like I was floating over my body. And it was that feeling of like an out of body experience. And then I looked over and I saw my grandfather sitting in a chair, and he had died several years before. And then suddenly I woke up with that start that you have. And I'll never know whether or not that was real, or I was just dreaming, or who knows? There's no way to know.
Well, the experience was real for you, whatever
it was,
reality of it. Neal Shusterman, this has been an absolute privilege and a pleasure, just a treat. And I know I could ask you another 50 questions, and you're going to write another 50 books. So hopefully at some point, an opportunity to
because hopefully, I'll get to live forever, so I can just keep on writing those books if I make it to 2042. So.
That's true. You've got, if for no other reason than to hit that 2042, you've got to keep writing. For today, my last question is usually some variation of, if you could go back toward the start of your career, middle of your career, wherever it would have made the most difference, and give yourself some advice that would have helped you on your journey and might help all the writers who are watching or listening to us now, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I would tell myself to stop stressing out. It's going to be okay. It is going to work out. It is going to be okay. And I need my future self to come back and tell me that now. So I will go back and tell my younger self that, but I need my future self to remind me of it.
You think that if past you saw you, I don't know, poking out of a cloud or whatever and say, hey, calm down, would that do it? Would you have been able to calm down?
No.
Well, there we are.
Because I can't take my own advice. It's the way it is.
So when future you pokes through, it tells you that, easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Where can esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media and all that good stuff?
Well, I have my website, which is storyman.com, which it needs a revamping. I'm going to be, redoing the website, but it's also on Facebook at Neal Shusterman. Same thing with Twitter and Instagram. So I'm pretty easy to find on basically all social media. And as I said, I do have a social media manager, but everything gets back to me, so I'm always responding to fans in one way or another.
I wanted to give you extra props just when I saw your web domain. Like, oh my God, he managed to get Storyman. How long ago did you secure that? That's fantastic.
As soon as I understood what the web was, I reserved that email. I reserved that domain even before I had a website, because I just prescient enough to know that this was going to be a big deal and I should have a really cool domain name. Okay. I just have to make sure that I don't let it expire, because then someone's going to grab it up.
Oh, in a heartbeat. You've won the internet. Hang on to it.
It's even my license plate. My license plate is Storyman.
Oh, fantastic. So if you see somebody out driving with that license plate, you'll know. That's selling.
They're the ones who stole it.
Esteemed audience, as always, for more interviews almost as good as this one, head to middlegradeninja.com. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.